believe it or not, I sold medical devices and then went into software sales. I was one of, black suit salespeople. And I was sitting at one of the companies that I worked for, and I was struggling, and I won't get into the struggle there, but there was a lot of non-support.
I can understand that.
Right.
Sounds familiar.
Right, by the local connection, there's a lot of non-support. And so it's really hard to even do my job. And I'm a person who, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do 100%. And I did not like, having my hands tied at every corner, and I was getting really frustrated. But I was also reading cards for people, on my lunch break, every evening, on the weekends. And I still had children in the home at the time. And I was like, I've got 2 full-time jobs and no time for life. And I sat one day, like after talking to somebody about making an appointment, and I just started praying. And I was like, there's a Haitian saying that says, if it's God who sends you on your mission, it was He who pay your way. And so I sat with that, and I was like, all right, if you really want me to be this, if you really want me to do this, then open the door. I will walk through it every time you ask. I will walk through it anytime you ask. You just show me the way, and I will follow. And it was powerful. Like even now today, I get like teary thinking about it. And so that was on a Thursday, and on Tuesday, the owner of the company called me and said, we're shutting down the U.S. offices. We're going to give you a 6-month severance, and you need to go do what you need to do. Like literally those words. Wow. And I was like, done.
Sky, when you said to spirit, God, universe, higher being, whatever you want to call it, when you said those words, like how did you know to say that? Where did that come from?
Well, that's part of where that, that hungry obliviousness comes from. It's just like, from the time I was little, even, most kids, when their mom would be like, stop with your active imagination, they'd be like, okay. And for me, I was like, no, like that doesn't feel right. And so, wrap it all the way back around to the class where you're in, like I am teaching you how to feel that over rationale or reasoning. And it's not that rationale, reasoning, or logic doesn't come into play. It does. It does. But like, you gotta feel first, act second.
I realized that as a child, and I've asked my mom about this recently. I took a test recently. Somebody was like, oh, you should take the highly sensitive person test. And I did, and it turns out I'm a highly sensitive person. And so like I have a hard time with lots of noises and a lot of people, and that's really difficult for me, and I cry a lot and like all of those things. But I remember as a little child being told, Alicia, you're just too sensitive, you have to grow a thicker skin.
Right.
And I didn't question that. I was like, okay, well, to survive in this world, I'm going to have to grow a thicker skin. So trying to fit in everybody else's world as opposed to like figuring out what to do for myself. That didn't come till much later in my life. And I think that's also what you're talking about.
100%. Is, because we have these sets of theories that technically are completely unproven, but we go by them, which is like, you must have a thicker skin. And then when we're 40, we're like, oh my gosh, where are my emotions? We like go back to where we're trying to get back to that point where we were when we were 4. And, all of these things that, it's just like, we incorporate these theories into our being when really like it's totally doing. Everything that we're taught is a doing. It's not a being. And so if we thought about like, well, maybe I do feel like I want to protect myself a little more, but I don't have to harden up. Like I can learn discernment. I can learn processing. I can learn, but everything, and not in all households. I think some people are getting a little bit better at it. But the idea of like, that's a little human from 1 minute old. That's a human. It's, it may be in baby form, but it's growing into a human. And like, what do you want to foster in that human? How do you want to let them choose, like how they grow? And so that's, it can be very, very beautiful and very, very intense to see like someone who gets to make their own soul choices. What happens? Like I said, I have 4 of the most beautiful humans on the planet, and it was by sheer, like oblivious, where I was like, okay, what do you think we should do today? Where do you think this money should go? I was like, and we all had a say, and we all had respect, and we all understood each other and listened to each other, and we loved each other, like a tribe, like a pack. And so it meant every person's voice was important. And that's what we lose with children.
Yeah.
We're like, what do you know? You're a kid. It's like, you're closer to the ethers than I am. You know a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Like,
the older I get, the more I see that. Like, I realize that some of the experiences that I had, as a child, I was much more connected. And you can see it in other little kids where they're much more in tune with spirit, energy, physical body, emotions, everything.
Yeah. I always talk about my granddaughter. I have 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson. One granddaughter who lives close, so I get to see her the most. But she's got this soul that is like untethered. I mean, she's just like amazing in her processing of things, and she just will go at it. And she had like a bully situation 2 weeks ago, and so she's talking about this girl who was like hurting her feelings, and she didn't know why she would hurt her feelings, and she was more confused about it than she was, mad or whatever. She was just upset. And so then she said, can I take this puppy to, it's like a little toy puppy, can I take this puppy to camp with me today? And I'm like, well, do they let you have toys like that at camp? She's like, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, all right, go ahead. She gets in the car that afternoon and she goes, it worked. And I was like, it worked. What was the plan? I wasn't in on, like, what's going on here? And she said, she loves my puppy. We're friends now. And I was like,
is that the one that was calling her ugly?
Yep.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So there's a girl who, the same girl, who was kind of, kids who don't know any better, like, they express themselves in uncomfortable ways. And so obviously there might have been some behavior she'd seen at some point, and she was mirroring. So she was, calling her names, telling her a bunch of stuff, and she said, my granddaughter goes, she called me ugly. And I know I'm not ugly, so obviously she's just sad. And I was like,
so wise.
Yeah, she was just like in her core, she knew her truth. And just because somebody was telling her something different, she didn't, she was more worried. Like I said, by the end of the week, she's like taking the puppies so they could be friends. She was more connected to the idea that, there should be no barriers between them. And kind of worked it
so
out.
Beautiful.
Yeah, she's, and if we listen to kids, they're going to tell us these stories. They're going to let us know. If you give them their voice, then, there'll be a great wisdom piece in your life, I think.
I have kind of an energy question for you around that, because of the work we've been doing. I'm reading more about energy too, and I'm reading this book, forget the name of it, I'll have to link it in the show notes, but it's about like kind of the science behind. It's an acupuncturist in New York that really wanted to understand what she was doing and why it worked, and so she kind of went on this journey to figure that out. But she talks about how in the book that a lot of times people who have experienced significant trauma in their lives are more open and more able to access that. Do you think that that's the only way we can access it? And B, do you think that's correct? Is it?
So I don't think it's the only way we can access it. I believe that right now we, in general, universally, there is a sad instance that is happening, which is addicted to trauma or addicted to suffering in whatever way. So learning from suffering becomes much more difficult if you're addicted to the action of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's why this divide that we see in many places is happening, that creates that fear-based action. All sides are fearful because that's the energy we're used to, and that's what I do feel like that it is one way that the pathways can be opened. Survival instinct. We have the 3 intuitions, like the fight or flight, freeze or fawn. Gut instinct that is our carnal instinct. We have our knowingness, which is like our true self, or like some people call it women's intuition, but everybody really has it. And then we have prophecy, and everybody's had deja vu, so everybody has access to prophecy, intuition. But that root-based positioning, that trauma, when trauma opens up those fight or flight intuitions, that carnal instinct energy, then
everything
it's
is
kind
processing
of,
fast.
so fast. It's like turning the sink on like full speed. Everything's got to flush down the pipe much quicker compared to just like a little drip. And so that's one way that it can happen. And a lot of people will say, some of the more, I don't want to say, more guru level sort of people, you can usually link something back in their past that they had that, flushed really open. But I think that love, to me, is the way to actually cultivate it, and to cultivate it in a healing way. Now, discomfort, yes. Discomfort is always going to be a part of growth, because humans also, one of their tendencies is to really like things the way they were, So my favorite quote of self, everyone can use this, is you can't have change without change. And so the idea that really
That's so
simple,
funny.
but it's really true. Because if you're going to do the same thing all the time, you're going to always get the same results. So without change, there will be no change. And sometimes change is uncomfortable. We don't want to take that time out of our day to tap into our true self and our intuition, because we haven't done it before, and it feels weird, and what if it doesn't work? And like our monkey mind, our critic in our head tells us 1,000 reasons why not to make the change. But that's usually because we're fearful of not knowing what's on the other side of it and the potential that we have in the world, which comes with accountability. And so I think that if we foster love, if we work in a way of self-love, the one growing so the some can grow, and then you are that example in the world, and then from being the example, maybe you go on to being a teacher, and from being a teacher, maybe you go on to being a guru. And like that sort of love energy, which says like, I am doing this because I am compassionate towards myself and others. I want more for me and humanity. I want to grow to the highest version of myself and accomplish everything I can. Like that sort of love positioning is really where transformation can happen. It doesn't have to be through trauma. It's just trauma can shock the system into opening those pathways more clearly.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like that you talk about in the Understanding Energy class is that there's only really two emotions.
True.
It's fear and love.
Exactly.
And I would much rather access these things through love. Yeah.
Exactly. And that when we talk about that, to me, in the end, like if you keep asking yourselves, like we talked about in the class, if you ask yourself enough questions, then the answer will be fear or love. If you like, why do I feel that, like you keep core truthing is what I call it, down to that center. And then when we know that we're fearful of something, then we can change it. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. But we know.
Don't be afraid of the fear.
Don't be afraid of the fear, because you're multiplying a negative energy with a negative energy. And there's a whole other topic we could get into there. But but the idea is, we have a shadow and a light side. Everyone has had something that hurt them in their life and something that they loved in their life. And if we pretend, and this is another one of my said about Suicide's kids, like denial energy, if we pretend like nothing bad is ever going to happen, we're building a house of cards, because
right.
You're gonna stub your toe, you're gonna get a flat tire, you're gonna have
someone
somebody
you love is gonna pass away. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you build that unrealistic denial position that says like, I'm never gonna be hurt again, then you are building double negatives, and you are building an unrealistic world where expectations lead to disappointments.
Well, and it's law of attraction too, right?
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
focusing on that, you're gonna get more of that.
Exactly. And so if you go like, things are going to happen, but I have the tool set and the knowledge and the capacity and ability and connection with whatever I'm connected to be able to create the solution and not have to suffer from it, then I may be challenged or have a tiny bit of pain, but I don't have to shift into suffering.
Yeah. One of the mottos that I've kind of started preaching to myself in the past few months is, I'm not going through something, I'm growing through something.
Right, that's a great one.
It's just like, it's not the things that are here are an opportunity. They might hurt in the moment. I might cry a little, but it's okay.
It is okay. It is okay.
We're all going to be okay.
Exactly. And better from it.
Yeah.
And better from it.
Yeah. Hopefully better able to share,
better
able to
be an example.
Yeah.
And that, and I speaking to that, like the beginning of my story, I used to not tell this the trauma position that I was put in my young life. I would go like, well, people can't relate. They have no idea what it would be like to be in that situation. They're not going to be able to connect. I had this protection piece, really not for me. It wasn't. That was my life. I knew that like the ingredients that came through it like made me who I am, but more because I thought that other people couldn't handle it. And it's only been the past 2 or 3 years that I've been, expressing the fullness of the story, which says, like I was, really stunted in my life for a period of time in the worst way. So in that means that, I can blossom to this position from where I am, and I don't like comparisons of things, but like if you look at, I'm not this, guru on the mountain who never had, tragedy. I've had some pretty big ones in my life, but they made me stronger. They made me feel more empowered. They made me hungry to be able to like be everything in life. And so, that's what I urge people to tap into when they're going through something. Is like, this is going to make me grow. This is, I'm coming out of this, and I'm coming out with, bells on and wings.
Yeah. We all have the ability to be the phoenix.
Yeah, exactly.
Multiple times,
as many times as it takes. And there's a saying that says 8 times down, 9 times up.
Yeah, I've got a Jeremy doll actually behind there, like that the Japanese Jeremy doll that's that.
Exactly.
That thing. So you've got lots of mottos that you share. Do you have a favorite motto that you live by?
Kind of it goes a little bit along with what we're talking about, but my true favorite motto is do not anger at the donkey for not being a horse.
Ooh, that's so deep.
Yeah, that's like my favorite saying. And so that brings us into that theory of like accepting things for what they are, and expectation brings disappointment. And so if we work in non-taking things personally, accepting things for what they are, then we can recognize like how we want to interact with them.
Yes.
If we make a choice to, pretend like the donkey is a horse, then at some point we have to realize like we are the creator of our woes. If we accept the donkey as it is, then we can use it for, how it works in our world in whatever way and interact with it accordingly. Or maybe you just need to get a horse.
Yeah. Hey, you need a horse. Maybe you need a horse and a donkey.
Maybe you need both. Who knows?
That's great.
You gotta acceptance is the first key to change.
If you could sit your high school self down and give her any piece of advice, what would you tell her?
You're gonna be okay. In truth and reality, like that's all anybody needs to know. Is they will be okay, no matter what.
Yeah. Thank you. Is there a project you're really excited to be working on right now?
Oh my gosh, I've been talking about this and working on this project for so long, but so I'm technically writing a book that is all of this. And it has parts of the class in it. It has parts of understanding the grove and how the grove works, not like as a mechanism, but basically like what it does to the body and the soul and the emotional sphere, and like breaking that down so you could put it into everyday life. And so I have probably been working on this book for over 2 years, but when I feel like I'm nitpicking it and trying to like, I don't want to say do too much, but like when it's not flowing, I set it down and I'm like, sit down for months before I pick it back up. But I feel like it's coming from Spirit, just like Grove came from Spirit. Like, you know, so many things just come through me. So whenever I feel myself getting in my way too much, I'm like, okay, when I'm called back to this, I'll come back to it. And so it really is, you know, I think it's going to be pretty groundbreaking. There's
I
some
cannot wait.
there, you know, because I have some theories that are original to me, like that you hinted towards, that, you know, are were given to me. And while I don't believe anyone on the planet says anything that has never been said before, it's the way it's said that I think makes a difference to people.
Yeah, and I want
so,
everyone to take